The past week was marked by three events. The first is a noticeable change in Ukraine's defense tactics with elements of attack. In addition to significant attacks on Russian oil refineries by Ukrainian drones, which shocked the aggressor's fuel infrastructure, some sabotage groups entered the border Kursk and Belgorod regions. And for several days now there have been rocket attacks on Belgorod itself, from which local residents have been drawn. War comes to their home. On Friday, the so-called Putin elections, which are the second most important event of the week, were even suspended in Belgorod. The Deeps will stick into the stumps for 3 whole days, which will make the special operation to re-establish Putin the longest in history. Of course, in conditions of extreme instability, all the cattle must be driven to the ballot boxes with the ashes of the electoral system and counted head by head. If there is a shortage, complete the drawings so that everything fits together and no burrs stick out. Pens with disappearing ink have already been distributed at sites in Kursk and Rostov-on-Don. The main thing is turnout, the rest will be redrawn and calculated on the orders of the dictator. In the Ukrainian-occupied territories, special voting at gunpoint began even earlier. This action should justify the invasion of Ukraine, they say. You see, the local population happily votes for Putin. To increase turnout, a special opposition has been mobilized to advertise the "Noon Against Putin" campaign. The point is to come to the polling station at 12 o'clock on the last day of voting March 17, look each other in the eyes and vote using the method of generating random numbers. Novelist Ivan Zdechdianov presented the Photon 2024 application, which will randomly select which candidate to vote for. This absurd idea confirms the suspicion that the Navalnyists' action is a cunning play on the Kremlin to increase turnout and capture those disloyal to the regime. The third important event was Emmanuel Macron's interview with a French television channel, where the French president confirmed his readiness to send French paramilitary units to Ukraine, and more precisely, to Odessa. And this could become the trigger point after which the war for Russia will no longer be the same. The head of European diplomacy, Borrell, predicted that the war in Ukraine would reach its turning point during the spring-summer. In all likelihood, Putin, immediately after his re-establishment, will decide to announce a new wave of hybrid mobilization in order to fill Ukraine with cannon fodder, and at the cost of insane losses, nevertheless, to take Kyiv, Nikolaev and Odessa, after which to capture Moldova. Perhaps this daring plan became known to Macron, after which he realized that it was useless to talk with the Russians. Europe and France were in danger, and it was time to act urgently and decisively. These actions will transfer the war in Ukraine from a regional status to a continental one. Putin's warning about Europe's readiness to use nuclear weapons was also heard, and no matter how German Chancellor Scholz avoids unpleasant decisions, he will still have to make them. Putin is already bringing reserves into battle, and after the pseudo-elections, a global meat assault on Ukraine and Moldova will begin. The future of Europe is at stake, not just Ukraine's membership in the EU and NATO. The Biden administration also understands that in the absence of greater military support for Ukraine from the United States, a huge number of casualties will be inevitable very soon. For his part, Putin is putting everything he has on the line, tying his fifth coronation to an existential tussle with the West. We are not even talking about confrontation, which is already in full swing, but about something historically inevitable, which is presented by racist propaganda as the final battle between the warriors of Holy Rus and the evil spirits of the West. At this time, NATO continues to conduct the Steadfast Defender 2024 exercise, which is already recognized as the largest since the Cold War. 90,000 military personnel take part in him, and for the first time Sweden and Finland, as new NATO members. Everyone is preparing for a war with Russia, and if it starts, NATO is ready to send 300,000 soldiers to Poland. Chief of the General Staff of the Polish Army Karol Dymanowski clarified, previously there were 40,000 soldiers trained to become NATO's shield, but now there are 300,000 in high readiness. These soldiers will arrive in the country not after the start of the war, but before it. End of quote. But this applies to conventional war. If Putin throws away the nuclear card, which he has been raving about for several years, then the world will never be the same, and the paradigm of survival, so close to the swamp empire, will spread to all of humanity. Neo-Bolshevik Russia, which has caught the revanchist spirit, is playing on this fine line today. And it seems that it was Macron who became the first who understood the true goals of the embattled Kremlin and made an official decision. Today, if we want there to be peace in Ukraine, we must not be weak. We must take a sober look at the situation. We must resolutely, with all the will and courage, declare that we are ready to do whatever it takes to achieve our goal, namely, so that Russia does not win.